Hello and welcome to Season 3, Episode 37 of Logicast, the AWS News podcast brought to you by Logicata. I'm Carl Robinson, CEO and co-founder of Logicata, and I'm joined, as always, by my ever-faithful soldier, John Goodall, lead cloud engineer at Logicata. How are you doing today, John?
Soldier's a bit much, isn't it?
Well, I'm trying to mix it up. You know, we've done a lot of these now. We must be getting on for 100 episodes, and I don't like to say the same thing every single time. Just
So
try
what
and
you're
mix
really
it up a little
implying
bit.
is working for you is a war. It's a real fight.
You were conscripted. You weren't hired.
I mean, they pay conscripts, so yeah, I'll take it.
Logicata needs you.
Oh, can't complain. Honestly, I'm all right. No plumbing updates. No plumbing happened last weekend.
Good. Glad to hear no plumbing updates. I've been working on my digital plumbing all afternoon today because it didn't seem to want to connect to one another. But by the miracles of modern technology and the internet, we are here and we are now recording. And we are also joined by a very special guest today, Ryan Pothecary. How are you doing today, Ryan?
I'm very, very good. Thank you for inviting me on.
No worries. Thank you for coming on as our guest. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Ryan, what you do for a living, what you do for the AWS community, etc.
Okay, so Ryan Pothecary, I've been working in IT for 30 years. I'm the data engineering academy lead for Digital Futures. Digital Futures are a mission-led company. We focus on the challenge of bringing people into the IT industry from underrepresented groups. So we create academies. We have people from all walks of life enter those academies, whether they've got IT skills or not, whether they have degrees or not. We've had doctors and nurses and pilots and West End theatre lighting directors join us. And we put them through the academy for 12 weeks, give them the kind of fundamental training that we know that they need. They're taught by instructors that have actually worked in the industry in the roles that they're going into. So we provide kind of firm foundations there, and then we place them with one of our clients where they start their career in IT. And prior to that, I was with AWS for 5 years. Prior to that, a whole bunch of managed service providers. But my real claim to fame is that I once stood next to John at a community builder event for about 10 minutes. I was too awestruck to speak to him, but I was again in his orbit. So that's on my resume.
So is this the first time John's heard this then? Did you know that you'd been stood next to Ryan Pothecary at a community builders event, John? Or?
Yeah, apparently I'm a minor celebrity now. I'll take it.
I wouldn't even register to him, honestly.
Was this at the London Summit?
This was London Summit, not this year, last year, I think, John.
Last year.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, because Carl and I both did booth duty that year as well. So met a couple of,
on the community booth,
folks. Yeah, met a few folks, some of whom have come on to be guests and things from that as well.
Yeah, cool. So I might be tapping you up for the number of that West End lighting director that you put through your academy, because I was having some lighting issues before we started recording this episode. So we'll take that one offline. But speaking of AWS community summits, etc., you're also a community builder, aren't you, Ryan?
I am been a community builder for 3 years now. I think it's a fantastic program. Really, it gives me such a lot to be part of that community. I have, thousands of people that I can call on and share advice with and ask for advice and share tips. So yeah, it's a great program. And I believe the admission cycle's open in January. So if you're part of that, I think I would get writing blog posts now, create some content now.
And with reInvent just around the corner, what better time to start blogging about AWS stuff? I saw that pop into my inbox the other day, actually, the application cycle. Does that include renewals, or is that...
No. So renewals are as they were, as far as I understand. The difference to previous years, and this was the same last year, I think, is applications are now once a year, not twice a year. And one of the points that Jason is very keen to make, and he makes this for renewals as well, but it's at a slightly different time of year, is if you're making content in December or January, sorry, that's too late, too little and too late. The point is you need to be showing evidence that you are just making content all the time anyway. I mean, we do this every week, but it's, if you wrote a blog post on the 5th of January and applied on the 6th, you've done that to get into the program, is kind of the impression that you're giving. Whether that's true or not, I don't know, but that's the impression that it gives off. So do it ahead of time. If you've got stuff that you want to put out, do it now. And if you've got stuff that you want to do as reactionary stuff to reinvent, that's cool, but it's probably not as valuable as stuff from your experiences. So start now. I mean, honestly, the best time to start, it's the same with anything. The best time to start was 20 years ago. The second best to start is right now.
I think it is possible to backdate blog posts on WordPress, but we probably shouldn't go there.
That's a bit cheap.
I mean, not really in the spirit of the program, is it? So
you can completely con things that scan WordPress into thinking WordPress is a different version of WordPress, but let's not go into that.
Absolutely. Anyway, we're not here to talk about tricking your way into the AWS Community Builder program. We are here to talk about AWS news. And as regular listeners to the podcast will know, once a week, I curate a list of AWS news, which I share via my weekly AWS News Roundup newsletter. And then John and I pick a selection of those articles that we'd like to talk about with our guest. So, of course, we have shared some articles with Ryan, and the first one should play right into your sphere of influence, Ryan, as it is all about training and building skills. So it's an article from the AWS Training and Certification blog about how you can enhance your real-world skills with AWS CloudQuest and AWS Jam. And I'm guessing John's picked this one because we're about to run a jam at our next Brighton user group. But I also read the article with interest because when I first looked at CloudQuest, it was really only for the AWS Cloud Practitioner. But it seems like it's expanded quite a bit since I looked. So it looks like you can now do solutions architect in there, generative AI stuff as well. Not sure it's for people of our generation, although, John, you're not actually in my generation. You know, I probably am just about old enough to be your father.
Okay, boomer.
Anyway, I'm not sure it's for me. I don't know if it's for you, John. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, CloudQuest isn't my sort of thing, and that's not a whole generational thing. I am a big gamer anyway, and gamified learning is a thing, and people do absolutely get on with that and do that. And I like a jam. Jams I like, and not just on with toast. We've done game days and stuff in the past, and they're always good fun, and you do come away learning things. But I'm just kind of the way I'm wired, I guess, is the whole university lecture style things. I do quite well with them, and then practice tests is always what's worked for me. This is cool though. I like this. I like different ways of learning and presenting things. It's still there's still kind of the split, I think, between Cloud Practitioner and everything else. Because whilst it's in CloudQuest, and yes, that was the only thing that was in CloudQuest to start with, it's tied into Skill Builder. So if you have a Skill Builder subscription, you can get the non-CP stuff, the non-Cloud Prac stuff. You can still get Cloud Prac for free, but that's the only thing you can get for free. So you do still need to pay the $30 a month or whatever it is for Skill Builder, which I think is quite a lot of money, certainly for certain people, when you can go and pay £30, £15 for a one-off for a course on Udemy or whatever, and they're really good quality. So the pricing still feels off. I like that they're doing it. I'm not a big fan of the slightly bad UIs of these things because I am a gamer and I'm used to things just looking a bit more real, I think, rather than this looks like SimCity from 2004. But it's cool. It's a nice way of doing it. I'm much more interested in the jam side of things because, as you said, we are about to run, I think, a world first, certainly a first for us, of the first jam in a jar event, which is cool. And I'm looking forward to that, so I thought I'd just plug that whilst we're here. But yeah, different ways of learning, different ways of training. It's always good. I'm just a bit disappointed that the pricing model just doesn't seem quite there.
What are your thoughts on this, Ryan? As I say, this is your world, really, isn't it? Skills building. So are you seeing much adoption on these types of gamified learning experiences?
So we've certainly had some students that have gone through, particularly the Cloud Practitioner, CloudQuest. And I'm exactly on the same page as John here, really. CloudQuest is probably not aimed at me and probably not something I would use myself. The jams, I think, are great. Love problem solving. I love the whole gamification of learning. I think that's great. Anything we can do to get people learning more, getting more hands-on experience. I think all of that's good. Um, Again, to echo John's point, this article, these cloud quests and jams have been on Skills Builder for a little while, really. So I think the point of this article is just for AWS training and certification to remind us that they're there, to get us to use them, and also, of course, to suggest that we subscribe to Skills Builder. And for me, I have a little bit of a problem with that, really, because I'm old school AWS. I believe that training should be free, and the more people that understand your platform, the more people that are going to use it, and so AWS benefit from that. However, I think there's a point here, which is training has a value, and if I had to pay $30 for something every month, then I would make sure I use it. And maybe something I get for free, maybe I would use it when I need to. So yeah. However, it doesn't sit very well with me. I think the price point is too expensive. I think if that came down significantly, you'd get a lot more people using it, because there's some great content there. Another aspect of this, which excuse me, which you may not be aware of, is AWS training and certification really do have quite a heavy skills builder first focus when it comes to content. So even certification courses like the Data Engineer Associate course, which has been out for about a year now, I think, there's no what they call ILT, in-life training content for that. It's all purely skills build. If you learn that certification, you have one option, which is skills builder. So people learn in different ways. For me, video upon video upon video doesn't work for me. I prefer to ask questions and stick my hand up and get an answer.
Yeah, and I guess the price point depends who you're selling it to and what they're comparing it to, because those classroom training sessions have been pretty expensive in the past, in the thousands of dollars for a sort of a multi-day residential training course. So the type of people who perhaps have been using that method of learning in the past, $30 a month probably doesn't seem that expensive to them. But if you are the type of individual that's coming into your academies, for example, who's trying to career transition and perhaps want to fund it yourself, then $30 a month for self-funding perhaps does seem a little bit steep. So perhaps some more thought required around that from AWS training and certification. But yeah, great to see these different options becoming available, I think. And perhaps the youth of today are going to expect this sort of thing. I don't know how they learn in schools nowadays. Maybe is it all games? Is it?
I mean, there is. Yeah, my eldest is in year 2 now, and all of the maths is largely gamified. There's an app on the tablet. It's just play these games. Okay, cool. It's better than a worksheet, I guess.
So I guess generations coming through, the future generations that we want to get into development and cloud engineering are going to expect this kind of thing. But yeah, it's great to see it coming through. On that note, let's move along to our second article for this week, which is an article on Medium about how you can secure SSH access to EC2 instances with AWS Session Manager. So why did you pick this one, John?
Because I do this all the time and I want to talk about it.
Fair enough. That's if you do it all the time, you don't have to think too much about it. You can just talk about it.
Exactly. Yeah, I did give it a quick skim, and they've got some valid points in there and things that are kind of worth knowing. But let's just, excuse me, coming down with a cold. I think I'm catching Ryan's cold, and he's 100 miles away.
Power of the internet.
Yeah.
Deary me. So yeah, this is quite cool. So historically, when you create an instance in AWS, sorry, hang on, this is. Oh, that was grim. When you create an instance in AWS, traditionally what you'd have done is you'd have put it in a public subnet, and you'd have given it a public IP address, and you've connected to it through SSH, and you've restricted the IPs maybe to your own IP or to your VPN or your office IP. Maybe that you should do, but maybe you did, maybe you didn't. Maybe you've put IP IP rules on through something like fail to ban, and that's quite good as well. But again, it's not quite bolting the door after the horse is gone, but it's like the horse is already trying to get out, and you're just going, oh, maybe I should put this little padlock on. It's not great. It's not ideal. And then conventional wisdom sort of moved on. It said, well, make sure that your instances aren't public facing because you reduce your attack vector, you reduce your attack surface. Cool. How do I get to them? I use a Bastion host and you harden the host. Okay, so I've got one host now instead of 6. Okay, that's better, but you're still jumping through boxes and you still have the same concerns and the same problems, and maybe you can harden them and reduce your attack levels, but it's not great. Session Manager through Systems Manager, and I've described Systems Manager a number of times in the past as an illogical collection of things that happen to live together, but they do. This
Isn't that most families?
I guess, yeah, this is an illogical thing, a collection of things that would have nothing to do with each other if they didn't happen to be related. At least my family's like that, but let's not go into that. This isn't a therapy session. I'm on a sofa, but this isn't therapy. Yeah, that's really put me off. So
sorry,
how do you work with this? You're off-putting at the best of times. So how do you work with Session Manager? So what do you do? Well, you don't need to allow any inbound ports, which is actually really novel. So for the uninitiated, the way security groups work within EC2 is you have inbound ports that you open, and it's ports and targets, and you have outbound ports and targets, and they're stateful. So if it's inbound and you connect in via SSH, you don't have to have any outbound connectivity enabled. It just sort of knows to do that because you've come in on that port. You can come back out on that port. That's fine. This one with Session Manager, it's the other way around. So it has to have outbound access on port 443 to Session Manager, to the endpoint for Session Manager. And you can do that over the internet, or you can do that through a gateway. No, it's an interface endpoint, not a gateway one, which means you have to pay for that to exist, which is a little bit naughty, in my opinion, because the only gateway endpoints that exist and are free are Dynamo and S3. Like, can you just put all of them as gateways? Please, I don't understand why you can't do that, but whatever. So you have that 443 outbound, and honestly, having 443 outbound to the internet, you probably need that anyway, just for your patching. So that's fine. That's okay, I guess. It calls out to Systems Manager, which goes, hello, I can register you. And then they can communicate through that two-way connection that's opened. I'm assuming it's using a WebSocket or something like that for a long-lived connection. But the idea is it registers out to Systems Manager. You can then talk to it using Systems Manager, Sessions Manager, and then put your teeth back in, as if you were talking to it via SSH. You're not. You're going over an HTTPS connection, which is fully encrypted and all the rest of it, which is brilliant. And this gives you a number of other things as well. So historically, security folks quite liked bastions because you could put logging on them. So you can see who's connected to them, where they've connected to, and all of the commands you can keylog them. Great. You can do that with SSM. You have to turn it on, but you can do that with SSM. So the connectivity is already tracked to CloudTrail, and you should have CloudTrail on anyway. So just if you haven't, turn it on. And if you want to do all the key logging and all that kind of thing, again, you can log that out to CloudWatch. You just have to turn it on. So you've got a full historic record of everything that everyone's ever done on every server in creation. Brilliant. You can access it through the web console, which is how I tend to do it because it's just easy. Just click, click, connect, bang, and I'm in. You can also tell it to run a certain set of commands when you first log in, which you would do normally for users anyway, like in the bash source file. And it's basically, it's useful because you get dropped into an SSM user, which is minimal shell, no autocomplete, no QoL, quality of life features. So you can just say, drop me into the EC2 user or Ubuntu or whatever. And then I have a terminal that actually feels like a terminal rather than feeling, like an old serial input, which is quite nice. And you can actually do it. You can port forward through SSM, which is really cool if you need to do things like pretending you're using SSH. So it looks like SSH, it feels and works like SSH, but it's not SSH. Why is that useful? You can SCP files up and down from your local machine without actually having SSH open. That's really cool.
You like this, don't you, John? I can tell
how
enthusiastic you've been. What about you, Ryan? Are you as enthusiastic about this as John?
A little bit too much, actually. I'm so glad you picked this article. I love Systems Manager. I've been banging on about Systems Manager forever, and it made me chuckle when John mentioned that you've got a whole bunch of functionality that doesn't really belong together, but it's all drawn together. So if you can remember way back in the day when all this functionality was in the EC2 console, and that EC2 console was getting more and more crowded, really. Love Systems Manager, love Session Manager as well. If I'm in the console, then I would potentially use Instance Connect if I'm in the EC2 console, just because it's really nice and simple. But if I was running in a production environment, then I would insist on Session Manager. It records the session for you, keeps everything that goes on in that session as well in a nice, safe S3 bucket. So I've got auditability. I've got everything I need there. Just briefly on Systems Manager, very short story. So when I was with AWS, my first year, we created a Systems Manager workshop for reInvent 2017. And myself and my colleagues Lee and Sanjay, we went to reInvent, ready to run the workshop. Everything was working perfectly. Luckily, it was scheduled for the Wednesday. On Tuesday, Andy Jassy announced the brand new Systems Manager, which, of course, he didn't share with us. And so none of our documentation would have worked. Everything would have broken. So I'm very busy in trying to get everything back together. It did work. It mostly worked.
On the new version?
On the new version. It was a busy night.
Yeah. Can't beat a bit of last minute running around trying to make things work.
Yeah.
I bet you're looking forward to that running the jam, aren't you, John, at the user group? There's going to be a bit of that for you as well, I think.
Well, we won't be making things work, so it either works or it doesn't on the night, because I'm not in charge of the platform. So it's just we're facilitating something that already exists, which means my stress levels are fairly negligible at the minute. But we'll see.
Well, you're also running it in a bar, so
yeah, that helps.
It doesn't work. Just go and have a beer, and network that way. Anyway, on that note, let's move along to our third article for this week, and this is an article from the AWS Cloud Operations blog, all about the fact that support for Amazon CloudWatch evidently is ending soon. And I have to admit, I'd never heard of CloudWatch evidently before reading this article, and I still don't really know what it is. So I'm looking forward to hearing from you guys a little bit more. I'll come to you first on this one, Ryan. Have you heard of CloudWatch evidently?
I've heard of it. I've seen it in action. I've never actually used it myself in a production environment. Never used it in anger. It always seemed like a great idea. The ability to run experiments on different aspects of your code, of your application or your website, and capture those experiments and kind of provide you with data on potentially, which one would be more profitable for you or which one has better performance, etc. So all of that, I think, is great. In the how long now? 4-5 years it's been around. 4 years maybe. I've never used it in anger, which makes me think that perhaps I'm the one to blame that this is going, because I didn't use it.
Well, I would imagine the reason it's going is because you're not the only one, Ryan, who's not using it. Because mind you, having said that, other services have been deprecated recently that people were using. Let's not get John started on that again. But
I don't care about this one. I don't care about this one. I care about code commit. That annoys me. I don't care about this one.
Yeah.
I was going to make an evidence.
Why don't you care about this one?
Because I haven't used it, and evidently, very few people have. What they've gone and done there, they're consolidating it into app config. Just go use app config. And honestly, I got the vibe of, why aren't you using Launch Darkly or some other third-party option for this kind of thing? Because it's the same sort of thing. So evidently, this is just something that can die, and they've dealt with this a lot better, I think, than the previous deprecations as well, because actually they've said it's being deprecated rather than just here's how you move away from using it. No, you can't use it. Oh, by the way, we killed that thing. It appears that they're learning, which is nice.
Yeah, we've got a whole year's worth of notice here, so
whole year to come to terms with this. Really, that's good. And obviously, as you mentioned, app configs are a similar type of service. Really, it's made me chuckle. Really, the John's reaction, but also I guess generally the furore around code commit and Cloud9, which I love Cloud9. I was probably the only user of Cloud9, but the other services that kind of disappeared because with Azure and GCP, they kind of do this all the time. I mean, with GCP, they seem to get rid of services mid-session almost, really. So we're just not used to it with AWS.
Yeah, the biggest user of Cloud9 was the training and development people, because all of their workshops use Cloud9.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah, and I think we wrote a blog post about this year or two ago about why you should choose AWS as your cloud provider, and this is one of the things that we pointed out that AWS don't do in comparison to the other vendors. And I don't know if we need to go back and rewrite that blog post a bit now.
Don't do brackets very often.
Yeah, very often prior to writing.
Correct at time of print.
Do we know if the APIs are going to still be there? Because I'm sure there's APIs still still available for things like simple DB and simple AD. I think they're still floating around somewhere.
Maybe. So not available in the console, but you can still
address
them via the API.
Yeah.
One thing you did mention Launch Darkly there, John. Obviously, that's not an Amazon product. That's a third-party vendor. I'd just like to point out they do really nice socks. So I might try and see if I can get myself another pair of those at reInvent when we're trying to fill our swag bags. Anyway, on that note, let's move on to our next article for this week, which is all about Amazon investing in the nuclear option. So we've spoken about powering data centers before. They're pretty thirsty beasts, particularly now with all of the equipment that's required to generate pictures on demand from a prompt with AI and all of the other wonderful things that AI can do. So this is an article on CNBC, and the title of the article is Amazon goes nuclear to invest more than 500 million to develop small modular reactors. And I'm thinking Back to the Future here. I'm thinking what was the thing that he had on the back of the DeLorean? No, there was the flux capacitor, which he invented, and then he came back with that that thing that you could just put food waste in, and it when he came back from the future, and he had his nuclear reactor on the back of the DeLorean. So I'm thinking it's going to be something like that. It probably won't be anywhere near that exciting, but powering data centers, John.
I mean, it'd be exciting if you're a nuclear physicist, I think.
Well, yeah.
Less exciting.
That's kind of. Perhaps. Yeah, so I mean, this isn't the first time we've spoken about Amazon more generally and nuclear reactors on the podcast, because they invested in I forget when, towards the start of the year, in extending the lifespan, I think, of an existing kind of medium-sized reactor. And that kind of makes sense because it was next door to one of the data centers. And yeah, okay, it goes out to the grid and then they pull from the grid. And this is kind of the same as well. Is they're investing $500 million. Let's not beat around the bush. It's a shed load of money. And they're going to get connected to the grid. And the point is the small modular reactors are easier to build, develop, test, bring online, all those sorts of things, so that they're just cheaper to run and come on faster and brilliant, wonderful. But they're going to connect to the grid. The data centers are still going to be connected to the grid. So it's not like they've gone and bought Fukushima, for instance. They've not gone and bought a reactor. They've just given, here's a buttload of money to Dominion Energy, I believe. Go develop some stuff. We'll invest and then we'll benefit from it. It's good PR. We need the power for, developing AI pictures of dogs. And great, everyone wins. Cool, wonderful.
Just before we go on to Ryan's opinion on this one, I had to Google it. It was the Mr. Fusion He came back from the future with a Mr. Fusion stuck to the back of the DeLorean, which I think you could just put food waste in, and it, created nuclear fusion. It was enough to power the DeLorean. Anyway, what are your thoughts on nuclear power for data centers, Ryan?
Well, I think we need a Mr. Fusion, really. I think
I think we do need a Mr. Fusion, yeah.
So this is a really interesting story. Obviously, AWS have been talking about sustainability for their data centers for a long time and leading the way in that. And a lot of their regions run purely on renewable energies right now. However, I'm probably not the only person who is slightly concerned or slightly nervous at the idea of a small modular reactor compared to a wind farm somewhere that I'm probably not going to see, really. So yeah, it's going to be interesting how other people's opinions of this are going to maybe shape it. The reality is, of course, that wind farms and solar farms can only account for so much of the energy that we need, and as we do more and more, and as we run more and more data centers, then we're going to need more. From my perspective, with the students that come through the Digital Futures Academy, we always talk about sustainability. The idea there is that if I can get them thinking and considering about things about the sustainability and how you can create maybe the same solution but in different ways, then as they move into careers, then they'll carry that on with them, really. The other reality of this, of course, is the world isn't just filled with cloud data centers. There are hundreds of thousands of data centers, and a lot of them have zero concern about sustainability. So I think this is an absolutely positive thing. Not as shiny and nice as maybe a wind farm or solar farm, but if it gets people moving to cloud and working in cloud and getting away from horrible data centers, then that's generally a good thing.
Probably a lot more efficient than wind farms and solar farms.
Absolutely.
But I think it's just the waste element, isn't it? Disposing of the waste in a...
That's a complete nonsense. I mean, this isn't.
Yeah, we've had this conversation before.
We've had this conversation. Yeah. It's a complete nonsense because of the level of energy density. I believe all of the waste spent fuel rods in all of human history is the same as something like 4 football fields because of the level of energy density. It's a tiny amount.
But I think it's just public opinion, perception,
yes,
isn't it?
Public perception is ridiculous.
Perception, isn't it? It just doesn't feel as nice as some of the other options, but incredibly that much more efficient, and as John mentioned, really zero carbon, and there's obviously that the disposal of rods to consider, but I think it's a good option.
Yeah, I think it's a much more viable option going forwards. Anyway, on that note, let's skip from one nuclear option to another. This does seem to be a bit of a nuclear option. Our final article this week is an article. This particular one is on Reuters, but if you read the trade press, this article's been in pretty much every publication all weekend since the middle of last week. This is a comment made by Amazon's CEO. In fact, I think it was AWS's CEO in an all-hands meeting, all about Amazon's return to the office policy. I think we've covered this on the podcast before, that Amazon said in January of 2025, all employees must return to the office 5 days a week, no more home working, hybrid working, flexibility, etc., because the belief is that not being in an office is stifling innovation. And Matt Garman said last week on an all-hands call that if you don't like it, go and get a job somewhere else, which does seem to be a bit of a nuclear option. I guess he's got some data to back himself up to say something quite so strong and bold as to the impact that's likely to have on Amazon. But Ryan, as a former Amazonian who perhaps enjoyed the good times of flexible working, what are your thoughts on this one?
Sorry, I was on mute.
Yeah, no problem.
This is really interesting. I think there's two elements to this story. So Mark Garman, the new AWS CEO, I think is just echoing the Amazon CEO, Andy Jassy's message from earlier on this year, really, which is we need people back in offices. That may work in the US. I don't think we'll have the same repercussions here in the UK and the EU. I think just the logistics and the practicalities of this means that it doesn't particularly work. When I worked for AWS in 5 years in total, I spent approximately 30 days in an Amazon office during that time. Most of my time was spent with customers. Half of it was spent working from home, either working for customers at home or when I was with partner training, delivering sessions at home as well. And that worked perfectly well. I didn't feel that I needed to come into the office to speak to anyone. On the rare occasions I had a great idea about something, I could reach out to everyone I needed, even via Chime, really. So,
I was going to say via Chime. It must
wow.
have been via Chime.
So I think this statement is only going to really lead to people thinking that working for Amazon, working for AWS is perhaps not for them. Google have a kind of 3-2 policy when it comes to home working. So 3 days in the office, 2 days at home. Microsoft has something very, very similar. I think most companies have something very, very similar. I know we do. But there will be people who are not anywhere near an Amazon office and just will not be coming into the office. So I guess if Matt is true to his word, then those people have to leave. But it's going to be a significant amount of those people. The second part of this is the reasons why this statement and the reason why Andy Jassy made that initial statement, which is, they want that spark. They want those kind of water cooler moments where people are discussing things and coming up with ideas. And so I'm guessing by this, they're feeling that they're not getting those ideas currently. Maybe
it feels like they're shooting themselves in the foot sort of measure, to be really honest, because they're just admitting, I think, that our last whole 2.5-3 years, we've been completely uninnovative. Okay.
Yeah. That's exactly the point. I mean, they've been talking about and creating AI services and ML services for, almost a decade now, really. I think Gen AI caught them by surprise. OpenAI did that first and did it really, really well. And right now, AWS along with Azure and Google are very much aboard that train. But I think you don't need to release earth-shattering services every year to kind of excite people. If I go back 3 years now to Amazon Bracket, so I know nothing about quantum computing. I think it's kind of witchcraft, really. But since that time, since it's been launched, I still don't know where I would use something like that in my business. I don't know how to use it. I think with the technology they've got already, I think just trying to make things a little bit easier and provide some understanding of how we can use it, how these things fit into our business or potentially fit into our business. I think that will be useful. Can I ask a question to you both? What was the last AWS release that really excited you?
That's a good question.
Excellent question.
Yeah.
Lambda, probably.
Wow.
I thought Bedrock was pretty cool.
Yeah, but I wasn't excited by it. I think that's just a bias thing. It took me time to come on board with the AI thing.
Yeah, but you got to get with the program. No, I think Bedrock was pretty innovative. It's a different approach to what everybody else is doing with AI. So I think that was a bit more exciting. But yeah, a lot of it is not very exciting. You know, you sit in the reInvent keynotes, and today I'm excited to announce this thing, which isn't very exciting. So, well, I'm glad you're excited because nobody else is.
It makes one of us.
Yeah. But what I thought was interesting, though, about this back to the office thing is, you know, a lot of these teams have not been built around an office. They're built around people with shared skills. So what difference does it make if the guy who's based in Newcastle that's working in the team with someone who's based in London, he goes to the Newcastle office and she goes to the London office? Because I had this exact scenario described to me the other day when I was talking to somebody from Amazon. And it's like, well, they're both going to have to go to the office under this ruling, but they're never ever going to see each other. So how's that really, you know? And I'm sure
exactly
that that's one of many.
When I worked in finance and banking, because most of our team, most of our technical team, wasn't in the country. They were in India and they were in China, and I was 3 days a week in the office because that's just kind of what we did. That was, you know, this was like 2014 or something. So we were just in the office 3-4 days a week because we were. It didn't really matter where I was though, because I wasn't in the same country. So why does it matter?
Yeah. But, you know, maybe it is those water cooler conversations. It doesn't necessarily have to be, I'm in the same team as you and we're going to innovate together. It could just be I've overheard someone talking about something and I've had this amazing flash of inspiration that I wouldn't have had if I wasn't here. So who knows? It'd be interesting to see what the impact is. If reInvent 2025 is going to have loads more amazing innovations because everyone's back in the office, or if half the workforce has just gone to work for another cloud provider. We'll just have to wait and see what the impact of this policy enforcement is. Anyway, on that note, we have reached the end of our time for season 3, episode 37 of Logicast. So thank you, John, as always, for your insights, and thank you very much, Ryan, for taking the time to join us today. It's been a real pleasure to meet you. Hope we could do that face to face at reInvent, and thank you very much for sharing your insights and what you do for the community. So that was season 3, episode 37 of Logicast. We are available to download from wherever you get your podcasts. And if you want to see the funny faces that we're pulling when we're talking to one another, you can see us on our YouTube channel as well. We'll be back with another episode next week. In the meantime, thanks for listening, and we'll see you again next time.